Welcome to Gather for Wellness Radio. I'm your host, Becky Litwicki, and it's Wellness Wednesday, which means we get to connect with another kindred spirit to expand our health and happiness and move one step closer to discovering our own magic formula for optimal wellness. Today, Esther Nagle is our special guest. After 20 years of unhappiness and addiction and living the wrong sort of life, Esther Nagle has had a breakdown that she now calls a breakthrough and discovered her calling to be a yoga teacher. While training, she discovered that yoga offered a new way to live, and she was able to beat her demons, depression, and addiction. And now, she's happy and sober. Here's a sneak peek.
Yoga is a way of life. There's a whole philosophy that I didn't realize existed. I learned about the 8 limbs of yoga, the yamas and the niyamas. The asana is just a tiny percentage of it. That there's actually so much more to it. That really asana is just the tip of the iceberg.
Esther, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited to hear more about your story and inspire others with the journey that you've been on.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, same. So can you tell people a little bit more about those 20 years of unhappiness that you lived through and kind of what that moment of breakdown or breakthrough looked like for you?
Well, I say 20. Really speaking, it was most of my life. I was pretty unhappy for most of my life. For 20 years, I had discovered that I could hide my unhappiness behind alcohol, that it was the fantastic mask to hide behind. I thought I was happy for a lot of that time. I would go and have fun. I would get drunk. I would go and listen to music, listen to bands, go to parties. I thought I was having fun.
Yeah.
But really, when I was alone, when I was trying to have a sober night, I was very conscious of the fact that I actually wasn't happy. I would sort of lurch from one disaster to the next. I had a bit of a reputation among my friends for being a bit of a crisis magnet. There was always something going wrong in my life. And everything was a drama with me. I didn't have little inconvenient things happen to me. I had big crises happen. And I just thought this was normal, and everyone around me thought it was normal. So I don't think anyone ever questioned it. This was just how I was.
Sure.
So nobody really ever looked to see if maybe there was anything underlying all that, was there a problem that needed addressing? That was just, Esther was a bit mad and a bit drama prone.
Sure.
And, so that was just how I carried on. And in 2013, 2013 turned out to be a real watershed year for me, which started badly and got progressively worse, when it just felt like life was trying to hammer me into the ground, that if it could go wrong, it was going to go wrong. I had family health worries, I had job worries, I had issues over breakup with my son's father and the unpleasantness that can accompany a relationship breakup where there are children involved, and it was incredibly difficult year. It was really unpleasant. A big thing was that the discovery of somebody else's addiction problems in my family sort of held up a bit of a mirror to me and made me really look for the first time at what I was doing, because while I was trying to comfort people in my family, I was actually going home being very, very aware of the fact that that could be me in that situation. And I remember the moment when I sort of realized that I was lost. And it was when I was listening to one of my favorite songs on one of my favorite albums by one of my favorite bands. I was completely obsessed with the newest Queens of the Stone Age album, Like Clockwork. And in particular, a song called I Appear Missing. It's the last but one song on the album. And it's an amazing track. And I realized with a real jolt one day that actually that song summed up exactly how I felt. Now it's talking about somebody that's kind of on the edge of tipping over between life and death, and it really felt like that's how I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized that I was lost and I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And a month later, I had a complete breakdown and I had to give up my job. I realized I wasn't coping. And then a few months after that, I decided to go and train to be a yoga teacher. And that decision changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because the yoga that I trained to teach, which I had never encountered before, but it absolutely saved my life. There's no doubt about that.
Awesome. I'm so grateful that you are willing to open up and share the vulnerabilities of your past and the journey that you've been on. So thank you so much for that. What was it about? What feelings were you having when you had that breakdown, and how did you pull yourself out of such a difficult situation and get yourself motivated to try something like yoga to turn things around?
Well, I was living in a sort of a cesspool of self-loathing, which is I'd lived there for most of my life, really. I'd never really liked myself very much. And I was absolutely at the bottom of how you could feel about yourself. What motivated me was it was purely to do with the benefit system in this country. I was, as a single mum, I was able to claim a welfare benefit called income support, which meant that I was just able to receive money until my son was 5, and he was 3.5 at the time. And I knew that when he was 5, I would have to go on something called job seekers allowance, and job seekers allowance is not a nice way to receive money. You have to go through horrible hoops, and I just thought if I had to go through that process, I would probably not cope very well with it. So initially it was, I need to do something to earn money, and I didn't want to go back to full-time employment. I didn't think that I was going to be able to cope with that. So I decided that self-employment was the best thing. And I'd been going to yoga classes for quite a long time at this point, but only practicing the physical. And I knew that it made me feel nice. I knew it made my body feel good, and that while I was in that class environment, I had a semblance of peace. Not completely, but I had a semblance of peace, and it would calm me down. And I mean, I would leave the yoga class and then go back into the chaos that was my life, and normally end the night getting drunk. But it would give me that little bit of space. So I thought, because I thought about being a yoga teacher in the past, so I decided that seemed like a very sensible thing to do. And I just thought I was going to learn how to teach yoga postures. I didn't realize I was going to learn how to completely revolutionize my life.
Yeah. One of my yoga teachers, she said in many classes, in one way or another, like, yoga can ruin your life. Like, once you know the gifts of yoga or the lessons from yoga, you can't pretend or you can't unknow those things. So what for you helped have that shift from yoga being a physical practice to it becoming more of a lifestyle for you? What was there anything in particular, or was it just that the like surrendering to the practice?
Well, I learned that yoga isn't just about what you do on your yoga mat. Yoga is a way of life. There's a whole philosophy that I didn't realize existed. I learned about the 8 limbs of yoga, the yamas and the niyamas. The asana is just a tiny percentage of it. That there's actually so much more to it. That really asana is just a tip of the iceberg. It's almost insignificant, which was quite a revolution to me. a revelation even, I mean.
Yeah.
So it was all the other stuff, far more than the physical practice, which I already knew about. And I mean, that did a lot of good for me. But it was the self-reflection element of it, the swadhyaya, which meant that I was looking at myself for the first time in my entire life. I was actually looking at myself without judgment, with compassion, because yoga requires you to treat everyone without judgment and with compassion. You know, we've got ahimsa, which is non-violence, non-harming. Well, I have to apply that to myself as much as I have to apply it to the animals that I don't eat because I'm vegan. Right. So I was looking at myself as somebody I care about for the first time. I was able to look at my past, and because a lot of the coursework I had to do involved, or it became that I was doing a lot of sort of unconscious writing. So I was just allowing my subconscious to write this stuff and having all these revelations about patterns between things that had happened when I was younger and what's happened now, and just being able to sort of unravel my past and make peace with it. And to look back and see that even the bad things that had happened to me were good, because I can now look at them and learn, and I am who I am because of them. So it helped me to sort of diffuse all the anger and the frustration and all the blame that I've been carrying around with me for my entire life. And so now I almost feel like I want to thank people that have hurt me in the past, because they've taught me to be the person that I am now, and I quite like who I am now, so it's good. The other thing that was absolutely massive for me, which, you know, in 6 or 7 or 8 years of going to yoga classes I'd never managed to achieve, was I learned to breathe properly. And that's huge. It's huge. Yeah. I'm asthmatic, and I was a smoker. So my asthma has massively improved now because I don't smoke anymore. But it's also my general lung health is improved because of the breathing. The difference that it made to how I feel, the way that I felt just changed, because breathing, pranayama, and a deep breathing keeps you calm. And I went from being highly strung, the slightest thing that went wrong, the slightest little slight against my day would send me into a rage that could last for a week. Whereas now, things that would have previously exploded my head, I barely even notice anymore. I started to realize that I was reacting to things differently, that I wasn't reacting, which was even better. That things could happen, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's happened, all right, I'll deal with that, but I don't have to let it upset me and ruin my day and ruin my children's day and ruin the day of anyone who happens to be unfortunate enough to cross my path.
So I'm wondering, how long was it between, like, when you felt those deep feelings of negativity that you talked about kind of sent you to your yoga training, until you finally started to have some of that, like, breakthrough? I know it doesn't happen all at once, but I think some students, like last night in yoga, we talked about having patience, because they see people bending in these crazy back bends or doing handstands, and maybe they're not there yet, and I think some people get frustrated. So for you, how long was that process between, like, feeling super negative about where you were at and finally starting to kind of see the light?
Well, first of all, I'd like to go back to what you said about people getting frustrated. And that's something I'd like to just flag up, that it's really important that people don't feel like that. When you're on your yoga mat, don't even look at what the other people are doing, because it doesn't matter what the other people are doing. What matters is that it's about you. It's not about just because somebody else can do more. It doesn't mean that what you can do is bad, that, if you can't do that full back bend yet, that's fine. Let your body do it when it's ready. Don't try and push it, because you'll only end up hurting yourself, and you'll end up getting frustrated. And, yoga isn't about, yoga's about relieving the frustrations of life. It's not a place where we should go and get frustrated. One of the first things that I was taught was that the key rules of yoga, if you want, is you don't judge yourself or others. You don't compare yourself to others, whether that's thinking you're better or worse than them, and you don't beat yourself up. So if if people can remember that when you go to your yoga class, if you can bear those 3 things in mind, you'll probably enjoy your yoga class a lot more.
Definitely.
So to go back to my sort of breakthrough moment, well, the course that I did was an incredibly intense course. We were practicing every day. It was a lot of study, a lot of learning. And I started to see the difference that this training was going to make to me really early on. I saw the potential for it. And I started, because when one of the early things that we were taught about was about awareness, about being aware of our body, of our minds, of our emotions. And so I was starting to become aware of changes very, very quickly, because I could see the potential for the changes. I started to look for them. And of course, what you look for, if you focus in on something, you see that, and it becomes really obvious to you when you're looking. So I started to see changes in how I was feeling fairly quickly, because I was really looking for them, and I was really desperate for them. And I was doing an awful lot of very intensive work. I mean, I in my first month of the training, I moved house, which is the most stressful. This was my second house move in about 4 months.
Wow.
And it was due to problems with the house. It was a whole stressful experience in itself. And so very early on, I noticed how differently I was reacting to that, how I was a lot calmer, just because I just started learning to breathe. So, I mean, I started like I said, within the first few weeks, I started noticing the differences that just taking slower, deeper breaths made for me, just being a bit more aware of what I was doing. But in terms of the massive life shifts, within 7 months, I'd stopped drinking, I'd stopped smoking, and I no longer felt depressed. I felt happy, I felt far more confident. I'm still learning, I'm still growing, I'm still becoming more and more of that all the time. But 7 months into my course was the last time I had a drink or a cigarette.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm so happy for you. Can you talk about, since you mentioned you had done yoga for several years, I think you said, prior to doing your training?
Yeah.
And for you, it was all about the asana and just like the physical part of it. So now that you've seen that it can become like a yoga lifestyle and how that helped you through addiction, what recommendations do you have for people who are in your position prior to your training, where maybe they don't want to be a yoga teacher or go through the training? How can they make just a regular class not so focused on just the asana, but like on carrying those things throughout the lifestyle?
Well, focus your attention on your breath, and really find a teacher who will teach you how to breathe. Because I went to some wonderful teachers, and I'm not going to criticize any of the teachers that I went to before, but I never learned to breathe. And I mean, they taught me amazing things with postures, and they taught me amazing things about yoga, but whether it was just that I wasn't ready for it, I don't know. It could be that I wasn't in a place to learn then. But I would say that find a teacher who puts importance on the breath and on relaxation. Relaxation at the end of a yoga class is never optional. I've been to teachers, there are people who walk out before the relaxation. I've been in classes where it's been presented as something optional. It's really not. It shouldn't be an option. It should be, you have to do it, because that's when your body kind of settles into what you've done. And I was talking about this because when I was doing yoga before, I was rubbish at relaxation. I would just look at the relaxation as the opportunity for me to plan what I was going to do next. It wasn't relaxation at all for me. And what we thought may actually have been going on for me was that in some ways it could have been that because my practice was so physical and I was putting a lot of tension into my body, and then the only way I was releasing that was by getting drunk and stoned after the class, that I was actually not ever releasing that tension. So my previous yoga practice was actually making me more tense.
Wow.
And so where I thought it was giving me space and relaxing me, it was, but then I wasn't doing what I needed to allow that relaxation to really work on myself. Yeah. So it's possible that if you only do a physical practice and you don't relax and you're not conscious of your breath, that you're actually, and I don't know, I have no scientific basis for that, only my own experience. Yeah. But it's something to bear in mind. If you're going to a physical yoga class and you're not relaxing, it's really worth bearing in mind if it's actually helping you to relax. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to think about that. And the other thing that I would say is to look at the yamas and the niyamas and look at how your life is in relation to that. And there are lots of books available that talk about the yamas and the niyamas. But look into that, because they can help you to live a life that's just a little bit happier, a little bit healthier, a little bit more sort of nourishing of your soul. Whether you're looking to live a deeply yogic life or not, the yamas and the niyamas are just basically how to be a decent person. And if you're living a very stressful life, you're probably not giving yourself the gifts that the yamas and the niyamas can give to you.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. You also have a book coming out very soon. Probably by the time this airs, it'll be out. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I talk about the yamas and the niyamas in that, funnily enough.
Cool.
Yeah, my book is, it's called Bent Back into Shape, Beating Addiction Through Yoga. It's going to be out the week of the 15th of May, so it will already be available by the time you're listening to this. And it's a sort of, I'm calling it's part memoir, so it's partly my story, but with a lot of the kind of the very personal detail taken out. Because I don't think that's necessary. So it's an overview of how I came to be a miserable 41-year-old alcoholic. And it's then how yoga helped me. And it's sort of like a self-help book. And it's also a bit of an exploration of how yoga philosophy can be applied to life. And to make anybody's life better, there's a focus on yoga, but the lessons in that book could help anybody. Mm. There is a lot of talk about addiction in general and alcohol, but anyone who's interested in learning about yoga would get a lot from the book as well. But apparently, it's a really interesting read. I've obviously read it, but other people have read it, and I've had great feedback.
Good. I'm sure. I'm certain that'll be a good one. You've got a great story and real strong passion, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
If you could go back in time, what is one piece of advice you would tell your younger self?
Oh, I've got so much. There's so much. But the biggest thing that has affected me growing up is worrying about what other people think about me and trying to fit in. And whenever I've sort of thought about this in my more private moments, I tend to use words that you might not want me to repeat. Say, yeah? But generally, it's like, don't worry about them. Don't worry about them. You're awesome. You're amazing. I'd love to go back and give 2-year-old me a big hug. I would really love to go back and give 18-year-old me a big hug because she really needs it. And just to to tell young me that in a few years' time, the people whose opinions seem so important right now won't matter a damn.
Yep.
And that the people whose opinions do matter, actually they really love you and they really care about you. Yes. And don't ever let anything come in between you thinking that, because they do love you no matter what you might think.
That's a good lesson. I feel like I think about that sometimes. Like how much I worried about whether there was like a bump in my hair when I was doing a ponytail, or whether so and so was going to ask me to sit at the lunch table, or things like that. And it's like there's definitely still, I have those moments too where it's like, okay, are people going to accept me the way that I am now? But thinking back then, I'm like, wow, we're just in a culture where people are so hard on themselves, and it's just it's sad.
It is. And we're encouraged to be, because there's massive multi-billion-dollar industries that want us to feel bad about ourselves. And I think that, I mean, the fruit, I learned a lot in the last couple of years, but the most important thing that I've learned is that I'm okay. And that I don't need to worry if I don't look like, I'm not the most gorgeous, I'm not the thinnest, I'm not the cleverest, I'm not the prettiest. It doesn't matter, because I'm pretty bloody amazing the way I am. And I think if more people could realize that about themselves, and that it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if you've got a kink in your ponytail, and it doesn't matter if you wear the most fashionable clothes, and it doesn't matter if you've got a few spots, or you've got lines on your face, or you've got a few grey hairs. That none of that matters as long as you're true to who you are. I think we're encouraged as a society to try and be somebody else so much that we lose touch with who we are, and then we end up putting on masks and hiding behind all kinds of things because we don't even know who we are anymore.
I think something that's helped me get kind of past that the most and work towards being more authentic myself is being open-hearted to other people. And when I can look around and find like love and beauty and perfection in an imperfect person, but just like, appreciation for who they are, and seeing that they're not imperfect, but they're perfect for what they need to be, or who they're showing up as. To me, I see that and I'm like, okay, if they can be imperfect but still have all this love and radiance from them, then I can be that too.
Yes, yeah. An interesting realization that I had very early on in my training was thinking about the judgment thing, and it's connected. That looking at how you look at other people, and it affects how you feel about yourself. Because we were taught, not to judge. So I started trying to be less judgmental, because one of the things I realized was that I was incredibly judgmental of others. And the more I tried to not be judgmental of others, the kinder I got to myself.
Yeah.
And it was just an amazing realization. And Brene Brown talks about when we're judging others, we're actually judging them in order to make ourselves feel better about something we're insecure about in ourselves.
Yes.
So if you're feeling, I've got children, I don't know if you have children, but if I'm looking at somebody thinking, oh, look at the way she's with her children, that's terrible, it's actually coming from a place of worrying if I'm a good enough mum. And so we judge from our own insecurities. We don't judge about the other people. Nothing we do is about other people. It's always about ourselves.
Right.
And that's, in a society that is so constructed around judgment of ourselves and of other people, it's a really good thing to bear in mind that actually if we try and be less critical of others, it's easier to be kind to ourselves.
Yes. Yep. Just open heart for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Cool. All right. What about, aside from time or money, what would you want more of?
Travel. I want to see the world. I really want to see more of the world. I'm going to India at the weekend.
Yes.
And I'm going again later on this year. I've waited 20 odd years to go to India, and now I'm going twice in 3 months.
Awesome.
Beautiful. But I just want to see the world. I always assumed I was going to travel the world. When I was young, I just thought that by the time I got to 43, which seemed like 20 lifetimes away when I was 20, I thought I'd have seen the world by now, and I've just seen so little of it. It could be really depressing if I let it be. But, I would travel. And, of course, if I had more time and more money, I'd be able to do that.
Travel more, right?
Yes.
Awesome. What about if you only had 5 minutes to create better wellness for yourself? What would you do?
Breathe.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite breathing technique?
There's a practice called Savitri Pranayama, which involves taking in a deep breath. It's a sort of ratio. So you take in a deep breath for 6 seconds, hold it for 3, then breathe out for 6 seconds, and then hold it for 3. Mm-hmm. There are other ratios as well. So you could do 8, 4, 5, 10. And each different ratio has a different effect on the body and on the emotions. And it's a fantastic one when you need to relax, when you need to just calm yourself. I use it if I'm having trouble sleeping, just to help me relax and to stop the chitter-chatter in my head. So there, yes, Savitri Pranayama, and also just Mahat Yoga Pranayama, full breath, the whole lung breathing. It's, when you just need that breath just to stop you from overreacting to a situation, just that, take a deep breath, count to 10, take another one if you need to. It's just so powerful to just stop and breathe, and not react in a way that you're going to regret 5 seconds after you've done it.
Totally. All right, and then what's your favorite health habit?
I drink lots and lots and lots of herbal tea. Since I stopped drinking wine and cider, I've got some pint glasses, and I tend to drink herbal tea by the pint now. So hydration, basically, make sure, keep yourself really well hydrated. And I do drink the odd coffee, but generally I've got vast quantities of herbal tea in my hands. And just keep yourself hydrated and breathe. Again, breathe.
Breathing, always breathe, never stop. It's amazing, it's such a vital thing, but we hold our breath unless we bring consciousness to that. I feel like that's more the tendency.
Yes.
So
yeah, we're not very good at breathing, considering we've been doing it all our lives.
Yes.
And we're really bad at it.
Yes. Well, Esther, this has been phenomenal. I absolutely loved chatting with you and learning about your story, and thank you so much for being here to share your wisdom.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to talk to you.
Absolutely. All right, we'll talk to you later, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Gather for Wellness Radio. Please head over to facebook.com/groups/gatherforwellness to join our heart-centered group focused on feeling great so you can live life to the fullest. I would also really appreciate if you'd leave a review over on iTunes, Stitcher, or the blog. And don't forget to share this episode with your friends and family and on social media. We hope you'll join us for the next episode. But until then, keep being awesome. The information provided on this podcast and on gatherforwellness.com is not intended to replace a one-on-one relationship with a qualified healthcare professional and is not intended to be taken as medical advice. Becky encourages you to make your own healthcare decisions based upon your research and in partnership with a qualified healthcare professional. The entire contents of this website and podcast are based upon the opinions of Becky Litwicki and her guests, unless otherwise noted. The information provided is for entertainment purposes only.